But going back in my memory, I knew to pray. I knew that when we were in the struggle, I would see my mom remove herself from the situation and go down into the basement, which was where her room was, and get down on her knees and cry out to the Lord. I would hear her cry. I would hear her cry out to the Lord for help. Hi, my name is Jenny Santos, and I'm the middle child of 3. My mother was a teen mom. She had my brother at the age of 16. She would give up her rights to her son to my grandmother. Because she was so young, she wasn't able to take care of him. She left the relationship and then 7 years later had me. She was with my father for a while, and she would soon realize that he was very abusive. He would abuse her physically, sexually. She's had miscarriages from him. She experienced different health issues because of the abuse. All that I witnessed to. I would hear him come home at night with a certain bang on the window that would just terrify me, because I knew that he was home, and I knew what that meant. That quickly would escalate into things. At a certain point, my mom and I would just flee to her aunt's house. We left everything behind, all of our belongings. We would just leave with the clothes on our backs and just go into hiding for about a month until things settled down. And we would return back to our home, where she had had enough, and she eventually would part from him. My father was in and out of prison almost all of my life. He would do 8 years and then come home, not even being home for about a month or 2. And he would go right back into prison to do another 8 years, like if it was nothing. I really despised my father. My mother was the type of mother that, despite of what she had been through with him, she always instilled in us that this was our father, and we had to look for him. We had to be with him whenever he was available. And I just could not, for the life of me, do it. I didn't want to be around him. I would hide every time he would try to come and see us. I was just afraid. I was afraid of just the abuse that I witnessed, that it would happen to us. So I never wanted to have that relationship with him. I was about 5 years old, and she was in a relationship with a man who treated us really well. You know, I really considered this man like a father figure. He treated us with kindness and love, and I think she was with him for about 4 or 5 years. And then things just happened between them, where he went on vacation, and on this vacation, visiting family, he winds up cheating on my mother, and he comes back, and they're done. The relationship is done. She would then be single for a little while, and that's where the struggle really came. She was a single mother at that time. My sister and I, we're 3 years apart, so my sister and I were very young. She built a relationship with one of our neighbors from up the street where they would kind of rely on each other. This neighbor couldn't speak English very well. She had 2 or 3 children, I believe, at the time. And my mom would be there to help her with her children, with her English. And in return, this woman would feed us because we were really going through the struggle. My mom would work 3 and 4 jobs just to maintain a roof over our head and having the bills paid. There were times where we had a little to eat, and then there were times where we had nothing to eat. We jumped from sitter to sitter due to my mother being able to pay and other circumstances. Eventually, we got old enough to stay on our own. So we would stay home alone, but she was always constantly checking in on us. We knew not to open the door and things like that. And in those struggle moments of not having to eat, like my sister and I would have to create meals. And there were times where we didn't have enough, and we would literally just open up a can of vegetables and eat the can of vegetables straight from the can. There were times where we had no heat in the home, so we would have to layer up, bundle up, and put our coats on, extra PJs, and we slept together in the bed just to keep each other warm. So this friend really became my mom's best friend, and they relied on each other for a lot of things. And my mom, again, would help her with her home, cleaning up her home, helping her with her children, her English. And in return, she would feed us. That's all my mom ever asked for her to feed us. My mom would literally go without eating just to be able to feed us. She wasn't a priority. She would make us the priority in her life. In all of those jobs and the ups and downs, my mom would be really sick. She would have a nervous breakdown from all the stress and the work and, just trying to stay afloat, basically. I think it was in the mid-90s where she would then find out that she had a pituitary tumor, and this would change things in her body. She would go through menopause really, really early in her years. This would throw things out of whack, her systems out of whack. And as a kid, that was really scary to hear tumor. Tumor's a big word, but not really knowing what that meant. For me, it meant that I could lose my mother at some point. Fear started to set in. And I didn't realize that fear had already set in from the very beginning of watching the abuse of my father to my mother. And that spirit of fear really stuck with me. When I was about 9 years old, my mom met this man, and he was incarcerated at the time. And again, it seemed like everything was okay and things were great. But again, we would soon find out that there was a lot of infidelity in the relationship with him on his behalf. My mom dealt with more abuse with, not physical this time, but it was verbal and emotional and mental abuse that would go on for 15 years. There was a child or 2 out of those relationships that he had established with these women. We were not fond of the man anymore. We would see that he was abusive to her in those ways, and it didn't sit well with us. But we were young and we really couldn't say much. We were not the adults in the relationship. So fast forward to high school years. I graduate from high school. I wanted to make my mom proud because she was a dropout, being a teen mom. So I respected her wishes and did the best that I could in high school. I was in a relationship with a high school sweetheart for almost 2 years, and that didn't work out too well. Witnessing all the things that I witnessed with my mother and her relationships really made me put up a wall, made me put up a guard around myself that would almost be like my protection towards men. I vowed at a very, very young age that I would never let a man physically harm me or emotionally or mentally or any of those things. I instilled that in myself because I just seen the abuse that happened to her, and I didn't want that for me, let alone my children in the future. I was very open but standoffish to guys and how they would approach me, almost like I had the upper hand on the relationship before it could even go that way. So I end this relationship in 2001, and right after that, I soon meet this other guy. This guy was a guy from street life. Little did I know that he had all these issues that was going on with him, but at that time, I didn't see those issues. It was almost like I had a blindfold to these things. I seen his heart. At that time, I couldn't explain how I could see his heart, but I knew what he was showing me wasn't the true him. It wasn't the person that I seen or felt. But I did notice that he was very much in the streets. We would get married very quickly. We met in 2001. February 2002, we actually got together. By December of 2002, we were already married. I was a young bride, just turned 20 years old. Very, very young and naive to it all. I would soon find out 3 years after that he had an alcohol addiction, and that alcohol addiction would turn into a drug addiction. When he would drink, he would need drugs to kind of bring him back down. And I didn't know that. I was completely blinded to that. Now that I know God, I know that God purposely kept me blind to that. So I would see who he truly was and not the things that he was going through. The relationship was up and down for 9 years. It was really, really rough. He would go on these binges where he would disappear. And again, it would lead to drugs. I wouldn't know where he was. I would be up all night, staring out the window, out the door, looking for him, just a nervous wreck, wondering where he was, wondering if the police would knock on my door someday and say, we found him dead somewhere. So fear definitely built up even more in me. We would have moments where, he was incarcerated. We had issues with self-harm. He would be on like suicide watch, different mental institutions. I would get phone calls from the hospital in the middle of the night saying that he had alcohol poisoning and that he would almost die. He had these moments constantly. But then there were moments where in those 9 years where the binges would stop. the chaos would stop. And it was good. And it was almost like a breath of fresh air. I would drop my guard and be excited to see who he truly was. And once I let my guard down, it was back again. It was like this monster was back again, and I couldn't control it. I didn't understand it, and I didn't know what to do with it. Prayer was my go-to. Again, we weren't a family who attended church regularly, but going back in my memory, I knew to pray. I knew that when we were in the struggle, I would see my mom remove herself from the situation and go down into the basement, which was where her room was, and get down on her knees and cry out to the Lord. I would hear her cry. I would hear her cry out to the Lord for help. And though we weren't very religious, I knew as an adult to pray. Prayer was my connection to God, even though I wasn't walking with God. I knew of God. I've never read the Bible up to that point. So I knew to pray. So during these 9 hard years, I prayed. I prayed without ceasing. Full transparency, I didn't believe that anything would change. I didn't see a way that anything would change. We jumped around from my mom's house to his mother's house. We never really had anything to call our own. And I thought that that's just what my life was going to be. I had plans for my life. I wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to go into the medical field because that's what I graduated high school with a license in. But when I met him, all those things stopped. I kind of put my life on the back burner and focused solely on him. And I put everything, literally everything, into helping him. His family at that point had given up on him. And I believed that if I didn't stick with this guy, that he would die. Nobody at that point want anything to do with him. And I couldn't live with myself if I left the relationship and I got a phone call saying that he had died. And I know looking back that that's nothing that I can control. But at the time, not really walking with God, that's what I thought. I thought that if I could control his addiction, if I can control where he went, who he's seen, and all those things, that I would be able to help him. I attended AA meetings with him, NA meetings with him. I helped build him back up to a place where, he was functioning again. In that back and forth, he almost like if the Lord just touched his heart in a way that was miraculous to me, because usually you hear people say, it happened overnight, and it's just figurative. It's not really literal. But one day he just went to bed and woke up the next day completely done with everything, with the addiction of alcohol and drugs, and never, ever looked back. it's miraculous to me because only God can do that. Looking back, God was with us the whole entire time. Fast forward to 2016, we get invited to a family dedication. So we go to the family dedication, and I walk into Kingsway. And as soon as I walk into Kingsway, at the time I didn't know, but I felt the Holy Spirit. I felt like this was my home. I felt comfortable here. I felt like I belong. Everything felt right. Now, in the past, I have been invited to many different churches, and they just weren't right for me. I never felt a connection to these churches or to these places like I did with Kingsway. Again, fast forward to December of 2016, we get invited again by our same relatives for the Christmas Eve service. That was the moment where I really felt the tug on my heart and in my life to attend Kingsway, that this would be my home church, that this is the place for me. This is the beginning for me. From that point on, I came to every single service, every single Sunday for about a year and a half by myself. My husband was not on board yet. He was done with all the substance abuse, but he was not there yet in his faith. We had 2 children at the time. They weren't really on board. They were younger, so they weren't really used to getting up for church on Sunday mornings and that kind of thing. And I literally would come to church by myself for a year and a half. I started out way back in the church, almost to not be seen. I would sit by the exit door, almost like a fly on the wall. I didn't want to be noticed. I didn't want anyone coming up to me. I was ready, but it was almost like testing the waters. And then one service I came to, Pastor Brian speaks on the family coming as a whole. And that really spoke to my heart because I almost felt like a conviction of, he was right. This was not just a journey for me, but for my family. And I would come home that Sunday and then tell my husband, it's time to go to church. We all need to go to church. That just created a whole nother monster. They weren't ready. He wasn't ready mainly. He would be very angry and annoyed. And I would still encourage him to go, and we would come to church on Sunday, and it would just be a fight, arguments, and just a frustration, and him being angry and being annoyed. But at the end of service, I would definitely see a difference. He would go from that angry, annoyed demeanor to this joy that would fill him, to the person that I seen, that the Lord has showed me. So I knew that this was doing something to him, but I didn't know what. And he started to realize that as well. He started to realize that after a few times of coming, he would notice the difference. The Lord would start to soften his heart, open his eyes up to see that there was something here for him too, that he would feel this invitation that the Lord was calling him, this partnership that the Lord was calling him to be a part of. And it started to become more natural for him. The anger, we would see the anger subside, the frustration, him being annoyed, all those things would stop, and he would look forward to coming to church every Sunday, participating in things with the church on Sunday. And even our children, they found joy coming to church. For a long time, I would war for my children, for my husband, for my family, by myself. It would literally feel like I was on an island, and it was just the Lord and I. I would try to reach out to the people around me, but it was almost like it was just me and the Lord. There was nobody else. When the Lord started to work on my husband's heart, I started to see the change. I started to see him be more curious, be more open. The Lord started to soften his heart and draw us closer together in marriage. We've been together for 21 years. And I've walked in my Christian faith for, it's going on 7 years now. I'm amazed at what God has done just within these last 2 years. So being a part of Kingsway, we have different nonprofits that we help during Serve Week and things like that, where we partner with them to help their organizations. 3 organizations really grabbed a hold of my heart because they really spoke to me and my life and my testimony. I have worked with and come alongside Leader Up, and they work with families and children in Camden, where I was born and raised. And then I also have come alongside and worked with Faces of Change, which is a nonprofit that works with people who have substance abuses. And that really spoke to me and my husband as well. And then another organization was the WOW Center. I started volunteering with them, I would say about a year ago. I was asked to be a part of the WOW Center as staff just this year. So April, I became a part-time staff member. My role there is food pantry coordinator. I see how God has been with me through it all. I've seen where He has protected me from the very beginning, that He's walked with me in the struggle. And I can see how my story is a part of where He wants me to go today. I'm excited to see where He's going to not only lead me, but my husband and my children as well, in our separate journeys, but also as a ministry together as a family. I know that it's very hard to find joy in your struggle, to find that it's all for a purpose. It's really hard to hear that when you go through that. Your struggle is what's gonna help you to grow. It's gonna help you to get closer to God. It's gonna draw you into this intimate place with God, where He's gonna be able to minister to you. He's gonna be able to bring healing and restoration. He's gonna be able to do the work that only He can do. We can't do that on our own strength. When you pause and look back at your life and see where He has taken you from the very beginning to where you are after the storm, you're gonna be in awe. You have a purpose, and He sees you. He sees you in your struggle. He sees you in your pain. He sees it all, and it's not for nothing.